In the summer of 2024, Durk Devontae Banks, Grammy Award winner, Billboard chart topper, father of multiple children, and a man who once titled a song, "Turn Myself In," was racing toward Miami International Airport, allegedly bound for Italy. Not for vacation, not for collab session. He had, according to federal prosecutors, already tried to board a one-way flight to Dubai, then Switzerland, and when those didn't pan out, Italy. The FBI had other plans. This is the story of a man who spent his entire career rapping about the streets, and then allegedly tried to manage them like a CEO. This is only the family and the feds. Durk Devontae Banks was born on October 19, 1992, in Chicago, Illinois, specifically the Englewood neighborhood on the south side. Now, if you are not familiar with Englewood, it is one of Chicago's most historically under-resourced communities, where poverty, gun violence, and a near-complete absence of economic opportunity have shaped the landscape for decades. It is not, to put it diplomatically, a place that produces a lot of tax attorneys. Durk's father was incarcerated when Durk was 7 years old. He was raised by his mother. He attended Paul Robeson High School, dropped out, and was drawn into the orbit of the streets, a phrase that sounds poetic until you realize the orbit of the streets is a polite way of saying he started catching felony charges before he was old enough to rent a car. In 2011, at age 18, Durk Banks was arrested for the first time. The charge, weapons possession. The sentence, 3 months. 3 months for a weapons charge. A sentence so short it barely qualifies as an inconvenience. The kind of sentence that, in retrospect, may not have delivered the message one might hope it would. He was out before spring. While cycling in and out of legal trouble in his early 20s, Durk Banks was also becoming Lil Durk, the melodic drill rapper who would define a generation. His 2013 mixtape I'm a Hitta went viral. His 2014 sign to the streets was a cultural moment. His label, OTF, Only the Family, became a legitimate enterprise: merch, music deals, streaming revenue. OTF was also, according to the United States Department of Justice, something else entirely. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's stay in the mixtape era for a moment because things were going relatively well. Relatively. In 2013, Lil Durk was arrested again, this time on a felony gun charge. He was released on bond and, in a move that would become something of a pattern, continued releasing music from the outside. This is, in many ways, the story of Lil Durk's career. Release a banger, catch a charge, bond out, release another banger. Repeat. It's practically a business model, not one you'd see in Harvard Business Review, but a model nonetheless. By 2019, Lil Durk was one of the most prominent voices in rap. He had collaborations with Drake, Future, Gunna, and Meek Mill. He had millions of fans. He had a verified Twitter. Things were looking up. And then, February 2019 happened. Durk was connected to a shooting, an alleged attempted murder. The details involved a conflict that escalated from interpersonal beef to somebody catching bullets. In May of 2019, and this is genuinely one of the more cinematic moments in all of hip-hop legal history, Lil Durk released a song called Turn Myself In. He then, in fact, turned himself in. Points for consistency. He was charged with 5 felonies: criminal attempt to commit murder, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, and gang activity. 5 felonies. He was released on bond. He continued releasing music. The charges were eventually handled through the legal process. Durk maintained his innocence. Life went on. Which brings us to November 2020, and the event that would set in motion a chain of consequences so severe that they would ultimately land Durk in federal custody 4 years later. On November 6, 2020, Davon Daquan Bennett, known professionally as King Von, Lil Durk's closest friend, collaborator, and OTF signee, was shot and killed outside an Atlanta hookah lounge. He was 26 years old. King Von was not just a friend to Durk. He was, by all accounts, a brother. Someone Durk had mentored, featured, and elevated. His death was, by anyone's measure, a genuine tragedy. A young man with extraordinary talent and an enormous future, gone. The altercation that killed King Von involved the entourage of rapper Quando Rondo. And here is where the documentary must pause. Because what happens next is not just a story about grief or beef or the music industry. What happens next is allegedly the story of a man who decided to handle a murder like a project manager. According to federal prosecutors, in the months and then years following King Von's death, Lil Durk made it broadly known within his circle that he would pay a bounty to anyone who killed Quando Rondo. Not a metaphor, not a diss track. A bounty, cash, for a body. Federal prosecutors allege that Durk communicated this intention using what the indictment calls coded language, a phrase that sounds sophisticated until you realize that federal agents are very good at decoding coded language and have been for some time. OTF members allegedly spent the next 2 years looking for their opportunity. It arrived on August 18, 2022. On August 18, 2022, according to prosecutors, associates of Lil Durk learned that Quando Rondo was staying at a hotel in the Los Angeles area. What allegedly followed was a logistical operation that would be genuinely impressive if it weren't allegedly a murder plot. 5 men, Kayvon London Grant, DeAndre Dontrell Wilson, Keith Jones, David Brian Lindsay, and Asa Houston, all allegedly connected to OTF, flew from Chicago to San Diego. They then drove to Los Angeles. The travel, prosecutors allege, was funded by Durk. On August 19, 2022, at a gas station in West Hollywood, a shooting occurred. Quando Rondo was present. Quando Rondo was not hit. Saviaya Robinson, 24 years old, Quando Rondo's cousin, was killed. Saviaya Robinson had nothing to do with the death of King Von. He was 24 years old. The 5 men fled. They boarded a flight from San Diego back to Chicago, prosecutors say, all booked on the same credit card linked to OTF and Lil Durk. The same credit card, the same credit card. Federal investigators, working this case 2+ years later, would eventually describe this detail in a way that suggests they found it almost offensively easy to trace. Between the alleged murder-for-hire plot in 2022 and the federal arrest in 2024, something remarkable happened. Lil Durk kept winning. In 2023, he released All My Life, featuring J. Cole. The song went to #1. It was everywhere. It was the kind of crossover moment that cements a legacy. In 2024, at the 66th Grammy Awards, Lil Durk won Best Melodic Rap Performance for All My Life. He stood on that stage, he thanked his family, he held the Grammy. Somewhere in the background, a federal case was being assembled with the care and patience of people who are paid by the government and are in absolutely no rush. The Grammy was on the mantle. The indictment was in the drafting stage. The irony is so thick you could charge it rent. On October 24, 2024, federal agents moved. The 5 OTF associates connected to the 2022 shooting were arrested in Chicago. Upon those arrests, the FBI received a tip. Lil Durk had booked 2 international flights departing that same night. Flight 1, Miami to Dubai, connecting through Doha, Qatar. One-way ticket. Flight 2, Fort Lauderdale to Switzerland, connecting through New Jersey. Also one way. He did not board either flight because, and this is the part where you have to admire the FBI's patience just a little, they had already learned through surveillance that Durk was on a private jet departing Miami to Italy. Italy, not Switzerland, not Dubai, Italy. As if he'd been working through a ranked list. Federal agents arrested Durk Devontae Banks on his approach to Miami International Airport. He was 32 years old. He had a Grammy on the shelf and a federal complaint in the agent's hand. Later, prosecutors would tell the court that he had not only booked 3 international flights in a single evening, but had done so after his associates were already in custody, meaning he knew the walls were closing in. The defense would argue he was simply a man with a travel itinerary. The government would argue that 3 one-way tickets to 3 different countries in one night, following the arrest of your associates, suggests something other than wanderlust. Judges, it turns out, tend to agree with the government. Lil Durk, also known as Dirk Banks, also known as The Voice, was charged with the following: 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder for hire, 1 count of using interstate facilities to commit murder for hire resulting in death, 1 count of using, carrying, and discharging firearms, including a machine gun, in furtherance of a crime of violence resulting in death. If convicted on all counts, Lil Durk faces life in federal prison. He pleaded not guilty. His defense argues the case is built on circumstantial evidence, that OTF is primarily a legitimate music label, that the government is criminalizing an entire artistic community. Prosecutors describe OTF as a hybrid, part music business, part criminal enterprise, drawing explicit comparisons to RICO-style racketeering cases that have ensnared other rap collectives in recent years. The trial has been delayed multiple times due to the sheer volume of digital evidence, text messages, phone records, financial transactions that investigators accumulated over 2+ years. Durk remains in federal custody at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Los Angeles. He has been denied bond multiple times. His legal team offered a $4.5 million bond package. The judge said no. Oh, right, we should mention this. In a separate civil lawsuit, Lil Durk was named in connection with the August 2020 murder of rapper F.B.G. Duck. Real name, Carlton Weekly, who was shot outside a Dolce & Gabbana store in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood. Carlton Weekly was shot in front of a luxury fashion store while waiting to go shopping. The lawsuit alleges Durk and others were involved in the gang-related attack. No criminal conviction has resulted from this lawsuit as of the time of this writing, but the timing, a separate shooting, a separate allegation, a separate legal front, illustrates the breadth of the legal exposure that has accumulated around Durk's name over the past decade. When your legal team has to manage multiple simultaneous murder-adjacent cases, it's generally a sign that something in the work-life balance needs recalibrating. On March 28, 2025, while sitting in federal custody at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Los Angeles, Lil Durk released his 9th studio album. It was called Deep Thoughts. It had been delayed 4 times, originally scheduled for October 18, 2024, before the arrest pushed it back again and again. The album came out. People streamed it. Life, as it tends to do, continued to unfold in its contradictory, impossible way. A man awaiting a potential life sentence putting music into the world, and the world receiving it. There is something almost Shakespearean about this, if Shakespeare had been from Englewood and had beef with a rapper from Georgia. The story of Lil Durk is not a story with clean morals. It is not a redemption arc. It is not a simple cautionary tale. It is not a story about rap being dangerous or the streets claiming another victim. It is more complicated than that. It is the story of a kid from one of America's most neglected zip codes who developed genuine artistic talent, built a real business, and achieved commercial and critical success that most people can only dream of, and who is now, allegedly, sitting in a federal detention center because, if prosecutors are to be believed, he decided that the appropriate response to his best friend's death was to fund a hit, delivered by associates who used a shared corporate credit card. There are attorneys who went to law school for 7 years who are still processing that detail. The tragic irony of Lil Durk is not that he came from somewhere hard. Millions of people come from hard places and navigate differently. The irony is that by the time of the alleged 2022 plot, Durk was successful enough to have chosen otherwise. He had the Grammy. He had the catalog. He had the streaming numbers. And yet, according to the government of the United States, he allegedly spent those years with a bounty still on the table, a debt he felt the world owed him for King Von. Whether that is true, whether Durk is guilty as charged, is a matter now in the hands of a federal court. But the outline of the story is already written, and it reads, depending on your perspective, like a Greek tragedy, a hip-hop fable, or the world's most expensive lesson in why you should never use a company card for anything you wouldn't want subpoenaed. As of early 2026, Dirk Banks remains in federal custody. His trial has been rescheduled multiple times. His music continues to stream. His fans continue to wait. His lawyers continue to bill. And somewhere in a filing room in the Central District of California, A banker's box contains phone records, financial statements, flight manifests to 3 different countries, and what prosecutors allege is a years-long paper trail of a man who was very, very good at making music and allegedly not quite as careful about everything else. Durk Banks is 32 years old. He has a Grammy, he has a 9th album, he has a trial date. And somewhere in Italy, there is presumably a hotel room that was never checked into, a reservation made under a name federal agents now know very well. This has been only the family. And the feds